Hello and welcome to the Functional Tennis Podcast with me, your host, Fabio Molle. Every week I speak to the big hitters in the world of tennis, both on and off the court, about the game and how we can all get 1% better every day at what we do. As an ex-national team player, I know exactly how tough this can be. So I'm on a journey to get the very best tips and advice from the world of tennis. This week on the podcast, we'll be talking about the art of coaching with Michael Logarzo. Michael is a top tennis coach based in Australia. He works with a range of players from juniors just beginning their tennis journey to established tennis professionals like Zoe Hives. In our conversation, Michael explains why one of the keys of being a great coach is having a broad range of knowledge. We also discuss the best methods for motivating players, and Michael shares some really interesting ways of keeping players engaged by making them more responsible for their own sessions. But before that, I want to know a bit more about Michael's own tennis journey and how he started out. So Michael, how are you first of all?
I'm doing great. Busy. So it's coming to that time of the year, the end of the year. So coaching year's finishing up and getting ready for the big summer of tennis here in Australia with culminating the Australian Open in a month's time. So really looking forward to it.
Great. Well, thank you very much for jumping on. I've been a big fan of your content for a few years now. You make great content. All your coaching posts that I make, our fans absolutely love. Really excited. This is long overdue, this chat, I think. So excited to have you on. But maybe let's start off with telling our audience a bit about what you do, who you are, and how your tennis journey began.
Yeah, so I'm a tennis coach, obviously. Work with a whole range of players, starting from those kids who are very young who are starting out, probably have that dream of being a top player, so helping them, and a lot of performance juniors, and as well as professional players, as working the main one with Zoe Hives. Feel privileged that I'm able to be able to work at all kinds of different levels, and I feel lucky because it gives me a great understanding of what each level needs. I just feel really blessed to do what I do. Probably fell into it a little bit. It wasn't the ultimate dream to be a tennis coach. It was always the dream to be a top player. But fell into it and loving what I'm doing. And each and every day I get up and wanting to be better. And that's what's driving me. So as I said, I started as a player, had a dream as a young kid to be playing at the Grand Slams, holding those big trophies up. Didn't work out the way I wanted. So my journey started when I was 8 years old. I remember my parents got me playing because they didn't want me to play Australian rules football and get hurt. So they just put me into some tennis lessons and I picked it up really quickly, really loved it. Then started playing some tournaments and just started doing really well from at a state level. And that sort of drove me to want to do more and more and more. So I trained a lot more. And I remember I think it was the 87 Davis Cup final when Pat Cash came back against Michael Logarzo. And that really, gave me that dream that I wanted to do this. This is what I wanted to do. Nothing else mattered. And, just started playing a lot of junior tournaments state in Victoria, in the state that I live in, and then progressed to national level events. And it was probably around the time when I was 14 that I really started to make a jump at a national level, winning 14 under nationals and playing, representing Australia as well, and going overseas and seeing some of the top kids overseas is when my journey really started to take the next step. Yeah, and just progressed from there and was lucky enough to play Australian Open Juniors and go overseas and play Junior Davis Cup at the time. And that was with some great players who ended up being top 10 players like, Ivan Lubicic, Karlovic was there, and I know Srichapan was one of the players who was my age as well. So I got to experience that. And then gave it a shot at the pro level. Didn't quite work out the way I wanted. And quit probably early. I think I was burnt out. So about 21, I stopped playing and I vowed I would never coach.
Hmm.
So I went to university and did a commerce and marketing and finance degree, and sort of was a little lost for a few years. Probably a bit disillusioned with when I stopped playing, and wasn't loving the game as much. And then I just got offered a job out of the blue one day. I got an email from a guy in New York who offered me a job at his tennis academy. And I thought, well, there could be worse places to go than New York. So I did that. Hopped on a plane, made a jump, felt like it was what I needed. And there I rediscovered my love for the game. And I guess in a way I fell into coaching. And that's where my real coaching journey started. Spent 2 years there, came back and have been going ever since.
Great. Well, we're going to talk about your coaching journey, more about that in a few minutes. But first of all, going back to your junior days, do you remember like the exact day where you said, okay, I'm getting serious here, I'm all in?
Yeah, no, I do remember. It was at the tournament called the Milo Masters in Melbourne. It was a 10 and under tournament, and it was the first time I'd played a state level tournament. And I made the semi-finals, like out of the blue. Like, had never seen any of these other kids playing. It was the first time I'd play, and I thought, I'm actually pretty good at this. And that's when I really felt like, this is what I want to do. This is the direction I want to head in.
And what did you do to go all in? Like, did you just train every day, or what changed? Apart from the mental thinking to say, I'm all in.
Not so much training more, because I think I was training a fair bit, but I think it was that belief that I can give it a crack, and that I, guess had a bit of talent and I could play the game. I also, at that time, I remember I got selected for the Victorian Institute of Sport, and I was one of the young ones, so I think you had to be 14 to get in. I actually might have got in when I was 13. And some of the players who were also in that squad were the likes of Mark Philippoussis, Andrew Illy, and some of these older kids who were all like top couple in Australia in the different age groups. So they were the people I looked up to. And our coaches, we had Peter McNamara, was one of our coaches, and it was a really professional setup. And I think I just stepped up in terms of the level of training and the standards of training to get to that top level, whereas I was just working with my coach and doing some squads here and there in different areas. But I think it was more the fact that I travelled a little bit more, was playing more internationally, playing more nationally, and being in the Victorian Institute of Sport and that setup, and with all the other athletes in the different sports and given opportunities to do different things. I think the level of professionalism in what I was doing stepped up. I think that was the big difference.
Yeah, that's what it sounds like. Your surroundings, you improved your surroundings, and that helped step things up. And as a junior, I know you talked a bit about getting burnt out further on, but did you have any challenges? What was your biggest challenge as a junior?
One of the biggest challenges was I was going to school as well. So I wasn't homeschooled. I wasn't, I was doing the regular school hours. So I was finding time was a big thing. So I know time to more so to train also, but also to keep up with my studies, because I think that was important for my parents particularly. So I do remember going, train before school sometimes at 6:30 in the morning. I remember, getting up early and leaving home, at 5:15 in the morning to go to train a couple of mornings a week. And then, right after school, I'd train from like 4 till 7:30 every afternoon. And with my parents working, having to make my own way there with public transport. So that was a lot. And then getting home and having to do homework was difficult. So that was probably one of them. I think having access to world-class, competition against the best juniors in your age in the world was difficult, being so far away in Australia. And you had that opportunity a couple of times of the year, which I was grateful for, because I got picked for some of those teams. So I think that, looking back now and knowing what I know now, I think they were some real difficult things to be able to get to where I wanted to. But I think also, just financially, like my parents weren't, flush with money or anything like that. And I was really lucky to have a coach who helped me out a lot from that aspect. So to be able to travel to tournaments and the financial costs that went with it, I find that was probably one of the biggest challenges.
And ultimately, what was what kept the fire burning? Was it just the dream to go professional?
Yeah, it's a dream. The dream keeps that dream to get to that ultimate level, to be top 100, to be able to travel the world, to play the biggest tournaments. That's what kept me going. I remember the experience I had when I was 18, and I was playing the juniors, and I played the men's qualifying. I got a wild card into that, and at the same time, I was also Steffi Graf's hitting partner, and I think it was 96 Aussie Open. So I was doing all those three things, and it just gave you that taste of what it could be like. Being in that environment. I remember going on practice course with Steffi, and you'd put your bag down, you'd look up, and there'd be people everywhere all of a sudden. That's when the venue was much smaller. So it gave you a taste of what those big events were like. And I just wanted more of it. And unfortunately, I didn't get what I wanted as a player, but that's what kept the dream going. That's what kept the fire burning.
Nice. It's definitely not, it's great, but not easy. What's the one thing you learned from being Steffi Graf's hitting partner?
The level of professionalism and how prepared she was. So the preparation was incredible, and also just on the court, just the focus and the attention to detail. I remember each session we were doing very similar drills, and they were all based around her game. So it was the simplicity of it, and also the attention to detail and the professionalism. And I was lucky enough, her coach at the time was Heinz Guntard, and he was really good with me in those sessions, and I'll never forget that. Like, he was giving me advice on my game and different things whilst I was hitting with her. But they were the main things, was just that level of professionalism, going to the practice court, and it was all business, and it was really specific, and it was all set up and designed for exactly what she needed.
So moving on to more current times, you're a coach, you work with players of all ages, levels, and obviously you work with Zoe, who's 150. Is she in top 150 at the moment?
No, she's in the 700s at the moment.
Oh, sorry.
She was 140, but she's been playing on a protected ranking, and she's had an illness the last 3 years, so that set her back, but she's fit, she's raring to go, and hopefully have a big year next year.
Okay, well, I'm looking forward to that year. But what makes you love coaching so much, and what makes you a great coach?
I think for me, I have a real obsession and a passion for learning. Like, every single day I want to get better. I'm one of those coaches who doesn't think they're good enough, and I'm always looking for ways that I can improve my craft, that I can be better. And it's not so much from a tennis skills perspective, but it's more how I communicate with people, how people are thinking, how I can get the best out of them, not only from a tennis level, but from a personal level and from a psychological level, and all those areas. So I love learning off my team. So I think that's the biggest thing for me, and what I try to instill with my players is that hunger and that thirst for continuous improvement each and every day, because I think without that you can't be successful in anything. So I'm really grateful to have those opportunities in a lot of different ways. And also, I love going out and researching and finding how I can be better. That's basically, my philosophy as a coach, is just getting better each and every day.
This new podcast format is heavily based on becoming better every day, 1% better every day. That's what functional tennis is about. And no better coach to have on to talk about this constant improvement. Where do you find, like, for other coaches, where do you dive deep to get more knowledgeable in all the aspects of tennis? Because we know it covers fitness, technical, strategy, nutrition. You have to know it all.
Yeah, you do. You have to you have to have a broad base of knowledge, and that's something I really believed in. So I don't need to know, every single detail of everything. But like I've done some, sort of tennis, fitness certification courses. I've done some, some psychology stuff as well, because I felt like I needed to have an understanding, or at least a basic understanding of things when I do talk to my fitness people, when I do talk to the sports psych, that I have an understanding of what, one, they're actually talking about, and two, that I can instill these things on the court as well, and know what I'm doing. I was very lucky. I had a coach who would do a lot of mental training with me from the time I was 12 years old. So I can remember, doing visualization when I was 14.
Wow.
And going through that process and doing it the night before matches, and going, in a space by myself 30 minutes before a match and doing some visualization, and it was really, really difficult, and I probably didn't use it as much as I could have, because it's just difficult to master. But like having an understanding of that has probably filtered into my coaching as well. And also I love learning from coaches in other sports. Like it's actually, I love being in that environment. I've been lucky enough to be in, other sports environments, with teams and in their player meetings and how they interact and what they do differently, and trying to pick up, different things that I can use, with my coaching and with my players. And I love doing that. I love, it's probably something I like to do more of nowadays, is seeking out other sports and what they do and what I can bring back to what I'm doing.
Great. No, there's definitely a lot to learn, and it's it just gives you new insight. But looking back, let's say your career's finished, you hang up your tennis rackets, and I'm going to relax on the sunny side of Australia, which is everywhere. What would make you proudest of? What would make you happiest looking back your coaching career?
I think it's knowing I've made a difference. I think as coaches, we have, an incredible responsibility to the players we coach. And I think there's a sacred trust there that we have that I take very seriously and feel like I have a great responsibility to these people. So knowing that I've had an impact, not only in their tennis career, but probably their life as well, and their lessons taught that they can take away with them afterwards. And I think knowing that players reach out to you, even after you stop working with them, I think is one way that happens. But I think that's the biggest thing for me, is knowing that I've made a difference.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. I think you spend so much time with players. I know some not so long, but in general. And I think, looking back at coaches myself, you definitely learn something from them. And you learn more for the off-court stuff, and that'll help you be better on court as well. But it's definitely, you're doing great, setting good inspiring players. And looking at players, junior players, what advice do you have for them, Michael? Some that are overtraining, burnt out, or have, some sort of setbacks. Looking back at your junior career and what you've learned as a coach, what advice would you have for players and for their parents to help them get through these situations, or possibly not to get into these situations?
I think the most important thing is to know where you're at every stage. So I think sometimes younger players and parents can start to lose track of where they are, and may think they're further ahead, or they have to do this because others are doing this, and not following their own journey and path. So I like to start at the end goal. Okay. So, if there's a young player that wants to be a professional, and they may be, 10, 12, 14 years old, is I work back and I go, okay, where are we at now? What do we have to do? What are the goals? Where do you need to be in, 2 years' time, in 3 years' time, 4 years' time? What's the journey look like for this particular player? Are they going to go to college? Are they going to be able to transition really quickly? And I think it's all about planning and then knowing where you're at. Do some players need to focus more on the physical side right now because, or do we have to slow them down because of their growth spurt? And I think sometimes to gain junior results, we sometimes lose track of that. So my advice would be to know exactly where you're at, have patience, and someone, I heard the analogy the other day. It's what I find in junior tennis. It's like imagine a child changing schools every year, how their education would go. And I find in junior tennis that happens a lot, where we're changing coaches constantly, we're doing different things. So the ones who tend to have more stability tend to last longer. Now, that's not saying that you have to find, you might need to change coaches to find the right coach. And as a coach, I've always said that, if I'm not the right person, then I'm more than happy for them to move on. But I think that's the biggest advice I would have. It's a long journey. Have the patience, stick the course. So whatever your path, and don't get deviated by the fear of missing out. I find, we're looking for that magic silver bullet, and it doesn't exist. So, follow your own path, not someone else's.
We've had plenty of coaches on the podcast before, and some of them speak it out as where they analyze the player and they say, okay, well, in 21, this is what you're going to look like. They're trying to gauge what's going to look like forehand, this, and they work towards that and they build that plan, as you're saying, and they try and instill this patience in their, the growth of their game. And it's hard for a kid to buy into that and parents to buy into that, because as you said, they want results today. They don't want to wait, and that can be tough. But looking at players, the top guys and girls, they're all competitors. It's nearly the better somebody is, the bigger competitor they are. They can just compete. And how do you instill competitiveness in the training sessions? How do you make them better competitors?
Yeah, and that's massive. I think without being a good competitor, you can't be a top player. And, only recently, when I was in the US, we did a little tour with Tennis Australia, and we're able to, the one thing that came out was the level of competitiveness in everything they do over there. Probably a little more than what we may have even here, and how do we instill that? And I think, and coming back, I've made changes in my coaching a little bit to try to create those situations even more so than I did before. Whereas I felt like I was doing it before, but I've placed an even greater importance on it. And it's more about creating the environment. So, if they're coming to a session with me, or if they're hitting with other players, or another one of my coaches is taking a play, is what kind of environment we can create to bring that out of them. And it may be, we may be working on some technical stuff, but how can I make this competitive? How can I get that out of them? So I think the environment you create is crucial. I'm one who likes to create situations that creates adversity. So, I like to see how they react. Do they thrive, or are they just trying to survive in those situations, and try to instill that and also teach them at the same time. So I don't necessarily always give them the answers. I like to allow the space for them to grow. And then also, what is competitiveness? I think it's a definition of competitiveness. A lot will say, well, it's bringing your best every day or trying hard. But, it also includes, your problem-solving skills and your emotional management, and how you're, counteracting, an opponent's game plan, and all those kinds of things. And on a given day, things may not be working the way you want, and what are you doing in this situation? So I think it's helping them understand what competitiveness actually means, and defining what that is, and then having them live that every single day.
And tell me some of your non-negotiables.
So for me, it's being accountable. So taking responsibility for everything you do on the court or off the court. So, maybe how you warm up, for example. If the warm-up's not to the standard, it's not making excuses, it's not doing that. Just being accountable. Okay, we need to get better. That's one of my non-negotiables, is the accountability side. So that really frustrates me. Another one is I want them to have a goal set, a purpose when they go out on the court. So, maybe say, well, what are we working on today? Well, I've sort of got a plan of what we're going to work on, but I like to ask them to make sure they've come to the court prepared and ready to go.
I think this is a really interesting point Michael's making here. So often we expect our coaches to guide our development and goals set for us. But by encouraging the player to have their own daily training goal, you create accountability, autonomy, and the player is going to be far more engaged as a result. This is just a quick reminder you're listening to Functional Tennis, the podcast that helps you get 1% better every day. With me, Fabio Molle. Coming up, Michael explains why he encourages his players to ask questions and scrutinize their sessions. And he also gives his advice for how we can all get 1% better every day. But first, I want to ask Michael how he keeps his players motivated on a daily basis. You know, bringing the heat every day with intensity and, want to improve every day requires a lot of persistence. And look, some days can be tough, as I'm sure you know more than me, with players and trying to get them motivated. How do you keep them persistent? Do you always go back to the plan, or how do you keep them motivated, is another word to use?
Yeah, always go back to the plan. And the other thing is each and every player is different and has different reasons why they're playing. So whilst they may want to, they may say, oh, well, I want to be top 100 in the world, but that might not be their real motivation as to why they play. So it's actually digging deeper and finding out what drives them, which is really hard when you have a lot of different players you're working with. And sometimes they won't tell you, so it takes a while to do that. And once you find what it is that drives them, I always go back to that. So, the first one is, I'll always go back to why are you playing? Why did you start playing in the first place? What made you want to come back on the court when you had your very first lesson? And usually it goes back to, well, I just loved hitting balls. I just love doing that. And I say, well, that's part of our motivation to get back to it. But it's what's driving them, what's making them want to get out of bed. It's the end goal. I always go back to what's the goal? What are we trying to achieve? And goal setting. Goal setting is really important. A lot of players will set goals, but it's those daily goals. It's those, I'm a process-orientated coach, so I'm all about the process. So I find that by focusing on the process, you will get that daily persistence. I think once the results come into play and you have a bad run, and it becomes too results orientated, I find that players can lose motivation and can lose a bit of enjoyment in what they're doing. And if they're not enjoying it, they're not going to be, able to bring their best every day. So I think that's crucial for me, is making sure that the process and the goal setting is there each and every day. And it goes back to the purpose and clarity that I spoke about earlier. When there's purpose and clarity in everything you're doing, you're going to come and bring your best every day.
And what about discipline? Do you see discipline in the same sort of realm as them, or do you see it a bit different?
No, it's exactly the same. The discipline comes from knowing what you're actually trying to achieve. Without, the discipline to do the extra work, the discipline to go out and hit those extra serves, the discipline to stick to your fitness program and push yourself when you may not want to, or you've had you're going through a training block where you're hurting physically, but you need to push. It's all part of it. They're all intertwined. They all work together. It's not like one is different to the other. I find that they are all working together. So the discipline, the motivation to come back. The discipline comes from having the motivation. So if you've got that motivation to come each and every day to work hard to achieve your end goal, you will be more disciplined. And at the end of the day, I think it comes back to how much do you want it? How much do you care? And if players aren't willing to do the extra and aren't willing to do the discipline, well, they really care enough at the end of the day. And, as coaches, we can't force players to do things. We can guide them and educate them, and we sort of facilitate the process for them. But, ultimately it comes down to the player and how badly they want it.
Do you have to do something else that other people aren't doing?
Well, not necessarily, but it's that willingness to do the extra. Because, look, to be honest, most players are doing, a whole heap of stuff, and everyone's different. So what one player needs, another player might not need to do. So I guess, for the juniors, it's more the lesson that, are you willing to go out and hit 50 extra serves or stay back after. It's like some, the team sports. You hear of the top,
Ronaldo or
the Ronaldo or Michael Jordan back in the day, or so and so who are there before everyone at training and leave after everyone at training. Are you the one who leaves right when my session's finished, or are you there doing the extra work, the extra serves, the forehands, the extra, backhands, because you want to master it. I guess that's what I'm talking about is, are you willing to do, what others aren't?
Yeah, no, that makes total sense. And you talked about earlier where you said you had to find your own, you had to find your own way to train, and your parents weren't giving you a lift. And it reminds me of my brother-in-law, who would have grew up in a Gaelic soccer household here, which would be similar to Aussie rules. And he wanted to play soccer instead. And the parents said, if you want to play soccer, you're going to have to walk. And he used to have to walk miles to train himself, wouldn't get lifts. And there was just that burning passion to play. But Michael, how do you control somebody, their heart, they're burning, they just want to play so much, they're intense, but you have to instill patience in them. You got to say, wait, slow down there. How do you make sure they're patient and you're trying to reel them back in because they're too eager?
Yeah, I think it's education. I think I think a big part of coaching is educating both players and parents, and knowing where you're at is, I guess, what I was talking about earlier, because, there'll be sometimes players who do too much, and you've got to reel them back, but you've got to educate them as to why you've got to reel them back. And I think once they have an understanding of why, they're more likely to do it. But if you just tell them, you're doing too much, you need to back off, okay, well, I'm not going to listen to you. I tell my students and my players is, if I tell you to do something and you ask me why and I don't have a good enough answer for you, don't do it. And I would like them to just be like that in generally. Ask why, ask a lot of questions. And if I can't give you the answer, then don't listen to me.
Nice. And the question thing is real funny, where you get the players ask questions. I've read enough I've read all the biographies of great tennis players, great business people, and been lucky enough to be around some of the support teams of some of the great players. And they always say, they ask questions. They want to know why. And once you have an answer for them, they're happy. But if you don't have an answer for them, you're nearly going to get fired. You need to know why you're telling these greats to do stuff. And once the answer comes in, they're happy.
They'll see through you immediately. Like, if you're working with high-level players and good players, they have a BS meter, is what we like to call it, is they'll see through you right away, like immediately. So you need to know your stuff. You need to know why we're doing stuff and have conviction in it. Like, you have to believe in it, because if you don't believe in it, there's no way known a player is going to believe in it. And I think even, junior level going, further down, those players who want to get to that level, it's the same. They want to know who you are and what you've done and why you've done it. And it's really important to know your stuff.
Yeah, I agree, 100% agree. Michael, moving forward, what's your plan as a coach?
I'm excited at what's ahead. I'm sort of in I wouldn't say a transition period, but just a period where I'm thinking about what the next step is and what my goal is. Like, my passion for coaching and my goal in coaching is I want to produce, top players, which I know a lot of other coaches want to do, so I'm not alone in that. But how do I do it? So, in our academy, we're looking at how we restructure our performance pathway and how we even go younger than what we're doing now a little bit, and what that looks like going forward. And then from a pro perspective, still working with Zoe. So we've got an exciting summer coming up. So still keen to get her continuity and some work on the road, because I think there's still still a lot of life in her, and we can get back, not only where she was, but higher, I think. And I think Wimbledon, and you were there at Wimbledon where she qualified, gave her a lot of confidence when she'd hardly played at all. So that was a great experience and probably gave her that confidence, but also looking for new projects and looking for new challenges is what I'm all about. So I'm like an open book.
Great. And what advice do you have for, you could say, players and coaches? I know they're separate, who want to be 1% better every day. What's your number one bit of advice for them?
If you think you know everything, you know nothing at all. So my advice would be, each and every day, keep learning, keep looking at look for new ways to get better. Invest in yourself, invest in your own development, be it player or coach, and always strive to get to the end of the day and know you've done something that's going to improve you as a person and professionally.
Nice. Thank you very much. I have a bonus question here. It's not on the list here. The Saber. Have you been using the Saber?
I have been using it.
Tell me, is it good, bad? Just tell your honest truth here.
No, fantastic. It's harder than it looks. So the first time I used it, just the timing of it, it was interesting. You have to hit it cleanly, and it's great because then once you go back to which is obviously the purpose of the Saber, but I actually found it more difficult than I thought I would. And then once I got the hang of it, I was hitting it really cleanly, and then I went back to my regular racket, and it was sweet as. Like I was hitting it straight in the center. But it's amazing how you've played so many years, and you think you hit it in the middle, and then you realize that, okay, no, I still need a bit of work on this as well. And
what would be your number one reason for giving it to one of your junior players to use?
For finding the contact point. So I felt it was really good in contact point and spacing. Made a massive difference for a lot of the kids. Like I've used it with a lot of the juniors, and at first they found they got too close to the ball and they weren't hitting through the ball. So the biggest thing it did was the spacing, the contact point, and also allowing them then to hit through the ball a lot better and stay with the ball a lot longer, and they started hitting a lot deeper, and that was the biggest benefit I got from using it with the kids. So it's fantastic. So I have to thank you for giving it to me when I saw you in London.
Great. No, I just want to ask. Sometimes I get people on who used it. I'm like, or it would have been the pointer before. And I was like, no, I better not forget. But no, Mike, thanks a lot. Really great hearing about your story. I hope to meet you I was hoping to get down to Australia, but it's not going to happen, unfortunately. So I'm relying on some good content from you. And but no, I hope to see you soon again. And thanks for jumping on. It was really great to find out more about you as a player, coach, and what drives you.
My pleasure. I loved chatting to you.
Great. Thank you very much. Thanks again, Michael, for sharing your insight into coaching. It was really valuable, and I can see why so many top players have worked with you. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Functional Tennis Podcast. Next week on the podcast, I speak with former player and now physical therapist and founder of the tennis tour agency, Matteo Tinelli. In the episode, Matteo explains the purpose behind the TTA and why he wants to make going pro more accessible for younger players. Matteo also shares his advice on overtraining and how to come back from injury. So hope to see you there next week. Just a few quick notes before we go. Make sure to follow the show so you get automatically notified about new episodes wherever you listen to podcasts. If you would like to learn more about me or the work we do at Functional Tennis, visit our website at functionaltennis.com. You can also follow the show on Instagram at the Functional Tennis Podcast and with me on Twitter, Fab Mall. This podcast is produced by One Fine Play. James Bishop is the executive producer. Connor Foley is the series producer. Kazra is our superb audio engineer and editor. I've been your host, Fabio Male. Thanks for listening to the Functional Tennis Podcast.